We continue now at the top of Daf Daled Amud Aleph in Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesubos Daf 4a. The Brisa is continuing to discuss what happens if, let's say, the father of the chassan or the mother of the kala dies right before the wedding. So they have the wedding quickly, uboel be'ilas mitzvah, and again he has the act of relations, which is known as the be'ilas mitzvah, the act of relations which is a mitzvah, uporish, and then he separates from his wife. Rashi over here says, uporish v'yikbru es hames miyad. At that point they have to bury the dead immediately. Tekevon dechola olav chasana hava legabe keregel, because since he's had the chasana now, so it's almost like a holiday. V'lo asya avelus v'chayla, and so therefore the avelus is not chal yet. V'noeg shivas yemei hamishtan, so therefore you have to have now the 7 days of celebration for the wedding. Again, uporish, and he separates. V'noeg shivas yemei hamishtan, and then he conducts himself appropriately for the 7 days of the wedding celebration. V'yachar kach noeg shivas yemei avelus, and then after that, that's when they have the 7 days of avelus. V'chol osan hayomim, and all of those days, hu yashen bein ha'anoshim, v'hi yashen bein ha'noshim. He sleeps among the men, and she sleeps with the women. And Rashi over here says, v'chol osan hayomim shel yemei hamishta v'shel avelus, and during the days of the celebration and during the days of avelus, they have to separate. Hu yashen ve'in misyachten zeh im zeh. They can't go into seclusion with one another. Shema yivol, because we're afraid they're going to have relations. V'avil aser b'tashmish hamita, and the halach is that an avil is aser in tashmish hamita. K'di alfinan be'elam megalchin, that is learned in moed katan. V'yaf b'shivas yemei hamishta shein keregel. Now, even during the 7 days of celebration, which is like a holiday, noeg hu avelus shall divrei tzina. He has to conduct himself as an avil in terms of things that are private. Dehainu iser tashmish kedel kamon, which refers to the fact that he's prohibited to have relations. And the Brisa continues, ve'in monin tachshitin min hakala kol shloshim yom, and for the 30 days we do not refrain from giving ornaments to the kala, from jewelry to the kala. Rashi over here says, ve'in monin b'shvil ha'avelus, because of the mourning, ein osrin ala tachshita. We don't say that her adornments are usher to her. Why? Shalot tiskan al bala, because we don't want her to look bad in front of her husband, so we allow her to have these tachshitin kol shloshim yom, all 30 days. V'af al pishen yemei avelus l'shar b'nei adam, even though for other people that would be a time of avelus. V'chol shekain mishloshim va'elach, certainly from 30 days and onward. Again, certainly she can have the tachshitin. And the Gemara continues, v'davka aviv shel chasan o ima shel kala. When we're talking about the person who dies, it has to specifically be the father of the chasan, not the mother of the chasan, and the mother of the kala, not the father of the kala, as Rashi explained on the previous Amud, because there's really no one else that can make up for the work that they put in towards the wedding. Aval ipchalo, but for the reverse, we would not say the same thing. Rashi over here says, in other words, if they're going to lose out on what was already prepared, there's no one else that can really fill in those roles of the father of the chasan and the mother of the kala, and that's why this halacha specifically pertains to them. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav from Bar Papa, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav from Bar Papa says in the name of Rav Chisda, Lo shanu el shenasan mayim al gabe basar. This whole halacha is only true in a situation where he already placed the water on top of the meat. Rashi over here says, Shenasan mayim al gabe basar shuvein roy lemocher b'makolin. At that point, you can't sell it in the normal marketplaces where they would sell the meat, so therefore it's going to be a real loss of money. So we say they get married immediately again in these situations where the father has died, the father of the chasan or the mother of the kala. Avalon, but if the water has yet to be put on top of the meat, mizdabin, so then there's no great loss. You can delay the wedding, and you can just sell the meat. Amar Rav, and Rav says, uvikrach, if you're in a large city, even if the water was put on the meat, mizdabin, it's still possible to sell the meat. Rashi over here says, bechrach, shchichi, and shituva, there's a lot of people around, v'yesh kofsim harbe, there's many people who would buy it, so therefore, again, over there, it's not going to be a real loss of money. You can just sell the meat, and then delay the wedding. Amar Rapapa, and Rapapa says, uvichvar, if you're in a small village, even if he didn't put water on top of the meat, lo mizdavin, it's not going to be able to be sold, because again, it's so small that the amount of people who are buying are so few that will be a loss of money. You won't be able to sell the meat even if the water was not put on the meat. But the Gemara now says, 1 second, if in a city you're always able to sell regardless, and in a village you're never able to sell, the elder of Chisda, sort of Chisda's distinction where he says it depends if the water was put on the meat or not, in what situation is that distinction going to be made? And the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Ashi says, Kagon Masa Mechasya, it's like the city of Masa Mechasya, to Mifka Mikrach or Mifka Mikfar, because Masa Mechasya, it wasn't exactly a large city, but it wasn't exactly a small village either. It was a medium-sized city, and therefore, again, only if you put water on top of the meat, so then you're not going to be able to find buyers, but if you don't put water on top of the meat, he will be able to find buyers. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kivasei de Rav Chisda. We have a brisa that supports Rav Chisda, again, who makes this distinction of when the water is put on the meat and when the water is not put on the meat. The brisa says, Harei shaya pito afuya, let's say his bread is baked, v'tivcho tavuach, and the meat is slaughtered, v'yeno mozug, and the wine is diluted, v'nosan mayim al gabe basar, here you see in the brisa explicitly, and water was put on top of the meat, umei savev shal chasan o ima shal kala, and the father of the chasan dies, or the mother of the kala dies, machnisin es hameis l'cheder, so then you bring the dead body into a room, v'yas ha'chasan v'yas ha'kala l'chuppah, you bring the chasan and the kala to the wedding canopy, uvoel bilas mitzvah, and they have the act of relations, which is the bilas mitzvah, uporesh, and then he separates, v'noag shivas yimei hamishta, and then they have the 7 days of celebration, v'yachakach noag shivas yimei avelus, and then they have the 7 days of mourning, v'cholos and hayamim, and all of those days, like we said before, hu yashin bein ha'anashim, v'ishto yashena bein ha'anashim, he sleeps among the men, and the wife sleeps among the women. V'chein mi shapir so ishto nida, and the Bryce also says the same would be true. Let's say his wife becomes a nida. Rashi over here says bichnisasa l'chuppah. When she's entering the chuppah, she becomes a nida. So it's the same thing. Hu yashin bein ha'anashim, v'hi yashena bein ha'anashim. He has to sleep among the men, and she has to sleep among the women, as Rashi says. V'ein nemon and zeh zeh. They're not trusted to be together at this point, because again she's a nida and they've never been together. So therefore he sleeps among the men and she sleeps among the women. V'ein monin tachshitin min hakala kol lamed yom, and we do not refrain from giving adornments to the kala for all 30 days. Bein kach uvein kach, in all situations, Rashi over here says, bein kach uvein kach, bein yesh onus, bein ein onus, whether it's a situation where there's something out of their control, whether it's a situation where there was nothing out of control, in all situations, lo yivol, you should not have the first act of bia, the first act of relations should not be lo be'erev Shabbos, not on erev Shabbos. Rashi over here says lo be'erev Shabbos, belel Shabbos, it mean on Friday night. Again, it can't be on Friday night because it's going to create a wound. That first act of bia will create a wound, which is going to be problematic on Shabbos. V'lo b'motzoi Shabbos, and also the first act of bia should not be on Motzoi Shabbos, and Rashi says on that l'kaman mefarish, that will be explained later on. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, Hu yashin bein ha'anoshim, v'hi yashena bein ha'anoshim. Again, he sleeps among the men, and she sleeps among the women. And the Gemara says, Messiah leila Rabbi Yochanan. This is a support for Rabbi Yochanan. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says, Afal pisha amru ein avelus b'moed. Even though they say that there's no mourning on a moed, avol devarim shel tzina noeg. But if you have something that's a private matter, a private kind of avelus, that you do have to conduct yourself as a mourner. Rashi over here says, Messiah le hadakatani da'asr b'tashmish. We're saying over here that even during the 7 days of celebration for the wedding, it's also to have relations, even though shehein lo karegel, even though those days are like a holiday. That's the idea over here. Even though there's normally no avelus b'moed, but things shel tzina, things that are private, sheino nikr lebrio shuava b'kach, where it's not clear that the person is in mourning, he's not doing it publicly, that kind of avelus is noeg. And the Gemara continues, Darash Rav Yosef berei de Rava mishmei de Rava, Rav Yosef the son of Rava darshan in the name of Rava, lo shanu, this halacha was only taught ela shelo bal, if they did not have relations previously. Aval bal, but if they've already had relations, so ishto yeshena imo, then his wife is allowed to sleep with him, because we assume that they'll be able to be together even though they're not having relations. They'll be able to hold back. Rashi over here says, lo shanu de'einam monin lis yached. When we say that they're not trusted to be in seclusion together, ela shelo bal, that's only if there was no active relations, the takif la yitzrei, where there's already a yetzer hara for it. So, but again, if there was already an act of bia beforehand, so then it's not a problem. But the Gemara asks 1 second. But over here in this very brisa, to bebal askinan, we're actually talking about where it says they had already an act of relations. V'katani, and still it says, Hu yashin bein ha'anoshim, v'hi yashena bein ha'anoshim, that he sleeps among the men and she sleeps among the women. Apparently we don't trust them even after the act of relations. Rashi over here says, to bebal askinan de katani, boel bi'ilas mitzvah lifnei kevuras hameis. In the case where there was one of the relatives died, the father of the chasen or the mother of the kala, it says first they have an act of relations that is the bi'ilas mitzvah, and then it says that they separate. So apparently we don't trust them, even though they already had that act of relations. And so the Gemara says, no, Kiko Amar, what was Rava saying over here? He was talking specifically, Apirsa Ishto Nida. He was talking only in the situation where the wife is a Nida. In a situation where the wife is a Nida, so then if they've already had relations, then we trust them to be together. But in the situation of the Avelus, we would not trust them even if they already had relations. Rashi over here says, Kiko Amar Rava Loshano, Apirsa Ishto Nida Amar. He was talking only in the case where she's a Nida. The Kavan the Nida Chamura, since Nida is a very strict thing, so Baal Mehem and Allah. So they're already, if they've already had relations, the husband is trusted. The Loasi Lizilzule Bisser Karis. They're not going to violate in Isser Karis. He was specifically saying this leniency by the case of Ishto Nida. He was not saying this leniency in that case of Avelus. But the Gemara says, one second, havechein katani. But doesn't it say likewise? Rashi over here says, havechein katani, kasal kadaitach. Right now we think it means akula milsa. The avelus midaminan le uva avelus the baal askinan. It says the vechein is going on the entire thing, and that vechein includes the case of avelus, and it would be the same exact halacha in terms of separating from one's wife. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Dalid Amud Beis.